Okay, well, thank you for coming out tonight or this afternoon. It's good to see you all. We've got just a really amazing panel prepared for you, and excited to hear what they have to say. So my name is Mark Donegan. I am general manager of a company called Dune HD. We make IPTV and OTT set-top boxes. I've spent basically the last 10 years involved in devices, content, distribution, so this is an area that I'm quite familiar with and real excited to be talking about. We've got just an amazing group of panelists and companies represented here, and so just some general housekeeping. We got 45 minutes, and this is a topic that we could probably spend 4.5 hours on. It's quite complex and a lot of different angles that we can go. So we're going to try and make this as relevant as possible. I do want to get to questions, and we're going to leave some time at the end. Depending how things are going, I may open it up in the middle as well. So if you have questions, write them down, and I'll definitely try and we'll try and get to as many as possible. So I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves and just give us a real quick 30-second overview in that introduction of what your companies do related to the topic, and then we'll dive in.
So my name is Kurt Hoppe. I work for LG Electronics, head up a innovation team out of the Bay Area, and our team does two things. We bring new features and services to LG's connected devices, so that could be televisions, Blu-ray players, smartphones, tablets, including appliances, basically inside the home. And then we take those platforms and devices out to new business-to-business channels. So not through retail, but why would a MVPD or a pay TV operator like Verizon want to write an application on a smart TV? So our team works with companies like that.
And my name is Mark Arana, and I'm with Walt Disney Studios, and I lead the strategy and innovation team at the studios proper. And so we're taking a look at emerging technologies, various distribution platforms, IPTV, cable sat, OTT, and also we are what I would call subject matter experts around video platform delivery of premium content for the studios. So everything from ingest all the way down to the client, we look at thoroughly, and then also Walt Disney Studios also licenses a lot of our theatrical content out there, so I work very closely with all of the online distributors like Apple, Amazon, and also the MVPDs as well.
I'm Imran Muscatia, and I'm with Redbox Instant by Verizon. We're a joint venture between Verizon and Redbox, the movie rental, that big red box in your grocery store. And my team builds applications for our service. We launched publicly this past March, and we're on Apple, Android. We've got a website. We're on Samsung and LG. We're on Sony and Xbox and Google TV and Roku and a bunch of platforms. So we've been really busy.
Hi, I'm Kerry Travella, Senior Director of Technology at Moby TV. We have a TV Everywhere platform that is deployed around the world, and here in the US we use that platform to run white label services, live TV services for Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. And as part of that, we have to port to more devices than we'd like to. And I think that's why I'm here.
All right, excellent. I'd like to start, I want to do a really quick audience survey. This is going to help frame the course of the discussion. So quick show of hands, how many of you are involved primarily on the content side? So you're a distributor, you own content is what you, okay. All right, helpful. Second group, how many of you are involved more on the CE device side? So you work for a large CE? No? Nobody? Wow, okay. And then on the technology side, is there anybody who's building platforms or involved in technology around apps on devices? Okay, All right, good. So we're kind of split there. Okay, well then it looks like we're starting at the right place here, since it seems like we have a lot of content, of publishers and content distributors. So I want to ask a very high-level question to start, and that is, who is generally responsible for developing apps? You know, is it the content owner? Is it the distributor? Is it the CE manufacturer? Mark, you're picking up your mic, so it looks like you're ready to start.
It's going to be a mix of people, and primarily as a content owner, we're leveraging our digital distribution partners for that, and so a lot of that is properly developed by those companies like Apple and Amazon and Netflix, and they determine what devices they want to be on. So from our standpoint, they are the primary. But then there are also a lot of content owners that are now going directly to consumers, and so there's a level of expertise that also needs to be at that content owner in order to develop and distribute those applications.
Does everybody kind of see it the same way? Or?
Well, I mean, if you look at what we've done over time is we've aggregated content, and we have to deliver that on behalf of a mobile carrier. So we're kind of a distributor of sorts in that way, and as such, we're responsible to the content provider for protecting that content. We're also responsible to the carrier for delivering an acceptable user experience that is worth paying a monthly fee for. So a little different model there.
I was going to say, from an LG perspective, we develop a platform that's available to application developers. So those application developers could be someone in East Russia, could be my brother, it could be Disney, Verizon, Redbox Instant by Verizon. It could be big or small. But we have a platform that's there, we have an SDK that's published, and we have a process to get a huge number of applications into an app store, just like on your mobile phone. Of course, there's an exception when a very big partner wants to have a special experience with better performance or something where they want to write natively, and in those cases we still think it's them taking the lead, but we have third-party developers that can help them, and we have our engineers that can help optimize experience, but that's for the smaller group of content owners.
It's interesting because back in the day when maybe most of us were growing up, there was just, if you look at analog distribution, there was the people who owned the delivery mechanism were the ones who delivered the content, and that's how it was. But now it seems like almost anybody can be the person who writes the app, right? It could be the CE manufacturer, it could be a distribution network, it could be the content owner themselves, and the lines seem really to be very blurred.
So, Imran, a question I have for you is, do you have any tips for how a distributor or publisher can best find an app developer? So not everyone has the luxury of having an engineering team like you have, and do you have any tips, insights?
So we do a lot of our own development. We also have partners that work with us. And one thing that we've found is that development partners, you want them really to be familiar with the specific platform that you're planning to distribute on, because there's a wide variety of platforms out there, and there's a wide variety of technologies used in those platforms. So, for example, if you want to get on Xbox, there's developers who have very specific expertise in getting on the Xbox platform. So those same developers may not know much about getting on a PlayStation or getting on iOS or Android. So there's very few one-stop shops, at least that I've seen. There may be some out there, but most developers seem to have very specific expertise in the platform. So that's one thing to look for. The other is to look for, and where that comes into play is not just in developing the app, but in helping you get that app through certification. Because a lot of these platforms have varying levels of certification, and some of them can be quite stringent and quite capricious. So if you've got experience in that area, or if you find someone with experience in that area, that helps a lot. I think the other one is people who know how to handle studio content properly, if you're interested in delivering studio content, because that is, as Mark knows, is a science to itself.
Yeah, that's very important. Are there any apps right now that you might think of that you'd want to throw out as some examples that the audience may want to look at as kind of, benchmarks, or that you feel are particularly well developed, well done? And it's okay to cite your own mark if so. But anything come to mind?
Sure. Any of the live TV services from the carriers that I mentioned. We pride ourselves on delivering content in very difficult environments, which is the cellular world, and we've spent years optimizing that for delivery over a CDN, for protecting the network assets and so forth.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I guess all of us would probably think of maybe Netflix as a pretty good application. They recently just refaced their application. They're rolling out that across many platforms. But I think the interesting thing with Netflix is that, first of all, they're supporting a huge number of platforms, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of platforms, but not, again, all of us have the engineering resources to do that. But I think when they do make changes, they don't rush into them. They think about them a lot. They test them a lot with user bases, and then they make slow incremental changes. So the addition of different profiles in the home was something they didn't have for many, many, many years. They started rolling that out within the last 6 months. And then recently, again, their new look and feel and some indicators of why you're getting a certain recommendation. Again, that's a kind of a slow and steady thing. Maybe like other service providers, they don't want to trigger support calls or upset their user base, but I think Netflix app incrementally just keeps getting better.
One thing I'll add to that, and I'll preface this, from experience in working with people and firsthand experience, video delivery is hard, especially a premium content. It is really hard, and it's really expensive. So if you want to get into this business, be prepared, because, there are very few successes like Netflix and like Hulu that have platform ubiquity, right? And these are people that have engineering resources built in. The challenge there is it's expensive. If you're going to go with maybe a white label solution, then it becomes challenging, because how do you differentiate your product, aside from content licensing, from another person that's using that same white label service? So, to answer your question, that unique flavor comes from the companies that have invested in the engineering resources, like a Netflix and a Hulu, which are very few in this area.
So it might be helpful to briefly educate those of us who aren't familiar with the differences between developing for a mobile device. Now, I'm going to qualify that. When I say mobile device, I think nowadays, traditionally we think of phones, but tablets are absolutely a mobile device. So just for sake of understanding here, a mobile device and a embedded CE device. So that would be a TV, a Blu-ray player, a connected device, media player, something I'm familiar with. Kurt, you are too. Who would like to, give just a real quick explanation? Because there's some, it's important to understand these differences. I find in my discussions, sometimes there's assumptions made that, well, we're going to utilize HTML5. We're building it inside Chrome because, hey, I hear that Chrome is now on this particular manufacturer's TV, and I'm just going to be able to launch my service and it's going to run. Well, we're going to talk about the reasons why that isn't true. But it is important. So who would like to take a crack at that? And just generally speaking, characterizing the difference between developing for a mobile device, iOS, Android, let's just draw the line there, and embedded.
So one of the things we've found is that, and I like the way you called out tablet particularly, because we actually find that the use case and the customer expectations for what happens on a mobile phone is different from that of what happens on a tablet. Mobile phones are optimized for one-handed use. 4, maybe 5 now-inch screens, unless you talk about phablets. I won't go there. But tablets are more around the two-handed use or larger screen use, 7-inch, 10-inch, and the type of content you would want to watch on a smaller screen versus a bigger screen is different. Whether you're using it in the house or outside of the house sometimes is different as well. So I think the important thing to consider is who's your user and what are they interested in doing, and then the devices kind of flow from that. So I would start with the user first, and then move to the devices and their use cases. The other thing that to me is important is the responsiveness of the UI and the look and feel and how it behaves relative to other applications on that device. The standards for that are different in a mobile world versus a set-top box world. People have different expectations of how how snappy it'll be and what you do what happens when you swipe and drag and versus using a four-way remote or a game console.
I would just add that, in a mobile world with iOS and Android, I'll call those out specifically, you have a pretty rich set of tools to use. And on an embedded device, it depends on what is supported there. Is it, just a bare Linux, layer? Then you've got to add support for video and, DRM and the presentation layer, right? So it can be much more difficult on a CE or, that type of device. And then the other big difference, of course, and I think it was alluded to before, is the whole getting it approved on a shop, and that process and the rules around that process. Does this app look good on a white device, or does it look good on a different kind of device? Will often determine whether your app can actually make it out to the public. Whereas on a CE device, there's a whole different set of rules around getting it embedded in the firmware and so forth.
So Kurt, for LG, if I take your SDK for one of your connected television platform, is there anything I can reuse on because you also make mobile devices? So are those two completely separate environments?
So good question. So again, it comes back to, are you developing a native app, or what we see is the majority of the world, kind of the HTML5 as a universal platform for modern computing. There's some challenges with HTML5, which I think you're going to talk about performance-wise or otherwise. So if you're doing HTML development, the answer is yes. You can run in the browser, on the LG Smart TV, or the browser on the mobile phone or the new tablet. There's also a development framework that's available starting in 2014, actually. We acquired about 8 or 9 months ago a few parts of a company from HP, WebOS, and along with that came an open source framework called Enyo, so a developer framework. And so if you use something like, if you're writing an HTML5 app, and you use an Enyo developer framework, you can target the platform that you want it to run on, and you can even make it, wrap it to run as an iOS app or an Android app. So there are tools that are becoming increasingly available for people that are developing on the HTML5 side. Native, probably you need to target each platform individually. So
where does WebKit and just straight HTML, old-fashioned HTML, fit in with HTML5? What are you all seeing? Because I know WebKit is still widely used and adopted and out there. So, any comments, observations? Is it all dead? HTML5's ruling the world?
Well, I can't speak to that because we actually have taken the traditional track of having a client, a retargetable client interface platform. Because especially when you're talking about video and video performance and the expectations of the consumer for snappiness and so forth, we just find that having a client-side interpreter covered with the native libraries that are provided on Apple and Android and Surface RT and BlackBerry 10 and on and on, they just perform better.
Interesting. So, Carrie, let's continue the discussion with you. So I know that Moby TV is doing a lot these days with Android. And tell us, Chrome and Android, is that a silver bullet for us to, break down some of the fragmentation, get on more devices, not have to implement so many different versions of our players and our services. What are you seeing, and give us some insights into?
Yeah, I would say it is not a silver bullet yet. Remember that for us, we have to protect our content. We have to have DRM all the way from source to the person viewing it. And there are not multi-platform solutions that address that at this point in time. And Chrome is not there yet.
So I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into all of this because I like to disrupt like that. I think when you're talking about a television set or a embedded CE device, what I believe you're going to see, and it's more towards the television set, and with apologies to my LG partner over here, you're going to start seeing the television set as the second screen, because tablets and the interfaces that they provide are going to be much richer, much more fluid. They can be updated based on the OS features that it has. You're going to see big developments between iOS and Android and their UI that they have. And then the television screen with things like Chromecast, Apple TV, specifically AirPlay, even things like Miracast and the things that Samsung has produced as well. It's really making that platform much more of a television display set. And because of the purchase cycles of these things being much higher than a television set, it's much easier to rev these applications than to ask for more CPU power or graphic power from a television vendor. Samsung, I think, is very unique in that they've got their Evolution kits out there to be able to do that, but that's $200 to $500. It's much easier to actually upgrade your Roku box or your Chromecast to the latest versions. So I think there's going to be a very subtle shift for the TV being the second screen.
I agree. Kurt, I would, and I'm not picking on you because you're a TV vendor, but I am curious because LG has recently announced a full line of set-top boxes. I know some of them are designed for IPTV and slightly different applications than maybe we're talking here, but thoughts, comments, counterpoint?
Sure. No, I know this is an OTT app development panel, but so I agree with you guys that if for some reason there's an amazing new application that won't run on your LG or otherwise a smart TV, then it makes sense. If all the other parts of it are still good, you should probably buy some cheapest thing that'll help your 4K, 8K, 16K stream. Come in through all 4 HDMI ports and everyone will be happy. But I also know that most consumers, and increasingly probably 6 or 7 out of 10, say that their next TV they're going to buy will be a smart TV. And certainly anything above 40 inches is going to be a smart TV anyway. Most people are buying 55 inches and up these days. Most of the rest of the TV market is flat to down. So most people buy a TV every 2 years. They don't replace it every 2 years, but there's a TV purchase per home, because in this affluent country that we're in, we're adding more TVs and extra rooms in the bedroom and the guest room and the kids' room and the loft and wherever. So there's TVs every 2 years. They do last historically pretty long. Now we're seeing down to 7 or 5 year replacement cycle. Anyway, so it'll be a smart TV. I would suggest that the way we're, and our competitors are engineering the TVs, you can strap a chunk of hardware on the back, that's one approach, or you can put a pretty good processor and a lot of memory in there, and you are relying on things like HTML5 and a HEVC codecs or some modern, whatever the modern technology is today, we're pretty confident it's going to last for 5 years. And then if you need to buy a Chromecast or a Roku or whatever, go ahead and buy that when at the same time you're putting it in the the kids' room, then get yourself a real smart TV.
So Imran, Chromecast, what is, is Verizon, is Redbox, are you excited about this? Does it open up new opportunities? Are you developing for it?
I see Chromecast. It's a really interesting device. As soon as it announced, I bought one for myself and I use it. I think it's to me, I see it mostly as a mobile accessory rather than a set-top box. And the reason for that is that obviously it can't operate by itself. It's not standalone. And so I think when mobile apps start to target Chromecast better, and when they start to have, when more and more apps are out there that can use Chromecast, I think you'll see it as a popular option. I still think it's a great step, but it's still a bit too geeky for the average consumer, because you've got to plug it into your HDMI port, you've got to associate it with your router, you've got to discover it on your phone or your PC, and then if you're on your PC, it only works in Chrome and only if you've got the extension. So there's a few wrinkles to be ironed out, but I think the promise is great. I think the idea of focusing on mobile first is interesting, and I think it's got some legs. I think ultimately it'll be the marketplace that decides how this works out, but I'm excited to see that innovation coming.
So Mark, I'm curious from your perspective, I happen to know, because I have to deal with this a lot, there's very stringent security requirements, and we spent a few minutes now talking basically about the Android world, and yet there are some problems in the Android world with certain content that, I think Disney would not allow to be delivered. Can you educate, for those that may not be as familiar with some of the issues, and help us understand how we can bridge those gaps, or if they can be bridged, and just talk about the security side of this, because just as a commentary to the audience, again, one of the things I think can get lost in these conversations is we hear about all these great technologies, we hear about various devices, but at the end of the day, unless I own the content, or unless you own your content, there's going to be someone else that's going to tell you if you can distribute to that platform and that architecture, and in what format. So you might be able to distribute to it, but in SD. Well, that's fine if that's on a 7-inch tablet. But all of a sudden, there's people talking about taking Android and putting it on set-top boxes as an example. Well, that SD is not going to look good on a 40-inch or 50-inch or, God forbid, an 80-inch TV. And so that's the setup for this question.
So there are many, many factors that go into a security recommendation or a security requirement. You're looking at what type of content is it? Is it television? Is it studio? What's the window? Is it within 24 hours of broadcast? Is it home video release window? Is it pay one? Is it free to air? There's a ton of different windows. What resolution? SD, HD, somewhere in between, 4K. What's your distribution method? Is it IPTV, cable, OTT? There's a number of different factors that go into distributing or receiving content and distributing that content through your service. And so through that process, when you're looking at Android specifically, you're looking at an environment that encourages, I'll call it customization. And through that means, you can load custom ROMs and things like that, but that also starts to challenge the underlying integrity of the operating system. Now, there are several DRM vendors out there that are trying to address, this issue, but it becomes a customized solution for each flavor of Android. So even if you take a 4.1 flavor of Android, you're looking at Samsung has a custom flavor, LG has the custom flavor. It's available to customize, and each Android platform also has specific hardware features to it as well. So typically the content providers require what's called end-to-end video path security, secure video path. And every hardware manufacturer is going to be implementing that differently. Is it a TI chipset? Is it a Qualcomm chipset? I feel bad for the DRM vendors because they have to now program it for each one of those different chipsets, and it's a real challenge. So when you're looking at Android, and the comment has come up, it's very fragmented. Yeah, it really is, and there's a lot of factors into that, from hardware to the OS implementation.
Yeah, and we actually addressed that with our DRM by working with Marvell to put our keys in at the trust zone level, right, so that we could do a set-top box or dongle implementation and achieve your security requirements.
Right, but when also, absolutely yes, but as a content distributor, I now have to worry about your platform, that platform, Android, whatever it is, and it just completely multiplies. And you may end up with, quite frankly, 3 different DRMs if you want to be on the most popular platforms. And that's a serious consideration and challenge.
And this gets into user experience as well, because now how does a consumer understand that on one device I own, I can get a certain set of content from Disney, for example, but on this next device, I can get everything except for these 3 titles. We can kind of maybe understand why that is because of the security and the way the windowing the content, et cetera, but to a consumer, it's just confusing. And that also has to be, I think, thought through.
Thankfully, I don't believe that there's any service that restricts titles. So if you own Pirates of the Caribbean, wherever Vudu has it, just strictly as an example, I believe Vudu has it on every single platform. Now, you may not get it in the resolution, or you may not get it in, like, for example, I want to download it. That may not be available everywhere. But thankfully, I don't think there's any restriction of title at this time.
It is true. It's getting flatter. Okay. Let's talk about portability of apps. So, and again, this just gets into the fragmentation issue, but, Imran, actually, I know everybody has something to contribute here on this, but, Imran, what's the best strategy in your mind, and what are you deploying, what is your organization deploying to, reduce development costs and provide the broadest coverage possible, knowing that there's going to be trade-offs?
Well, as Mark said, this is a hard business to be in, and it's an expensive business to be in. So that, if you're trying to do this on the cheap, I would caution you against it. That said, one of the things that we did, and we had the benefit of starting after some of the other folks in the space, is that we built a server architecture, and there's a couple gentlemen in this room who are responsible for that, but we built a server architecture that anticipates a lot of business cases and provides support for that at a sort of a facade level, so that the client app development is as minimal as possible. The business rules live more on the server and less on the client. And that helps a lot, because then when you have to move to the next device and the next device and the next device, you don't have to re-implement those business rules again and again and again. I think targeting HTML5 development is useful and good, and to the extent that you can get away with it, great. There's platforms where the performance isn't there yet. There's platforms where, because it's such an important platform to you, you'll want to do it in a native experience and tailor your experience specifically for that platform. So in terms of portability, there's not a lot yet. If you're trying to cover all the devices that the major OTT services or the major MSOs or MVPDs are on. I think the other thing to think about is your DRM situation. As Mark said, right now there isn't one DRM that covers all devices. If there is, that would be great. If there was a standard, and I know the HTML5 guys are working on standards for accessing DRM, it's still not a DRM standard, but it's another step along that way. That when it gets the encrypted media extensions and media streaming, all of that work, when it gets there, will be useful, but that's still not a single DRM for all devices, which is what you would really need.
I'll add that was fantastic advice. I'll also add one thing that gets really expensive is your video storage on CDNs. So you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars up on a CDN per month. And one thing to really look into is how are you creating your video? Because oftentimes when you go to these encode houses, they'll oftentimes provide you, or quite frankly hardware, there are these profiles for Microsoft PIF. If you want to do smooth streaming, HLS is another profile, and Whitevine's another profile, Verimatrix. And all of a sudden you've got 5 encoded videos that then need to be DRM'd based on the platform that you're doing. So what I would encourage you is to take a look at your video profiles very carefully, and it honestly requires some expertise here, and be able to craft a very common video streaming format, H.264, MP4 based, and take a look at something like MPEG-Dash, and then look at something like common encryption. Because there's going to be a lot of work in that area where you can, again, serious engineering research, but I think it pays off in the end, that you should be able to craft a single video package and then just encrypt as you need to for the various, actually encrypt once, and then just change the headers for the DRM that you're selecting. So that may save you operationally, that's going to save you on the CDN, and you'll be able to take advantage of caching, edge caching structures because you're still using the same video file itself. So that's another bit of advice.
Yeah, the only dimension that you missed was each of those profiles has to have different bit rate depending if you do dynamic adaptation. So there's another whole
So
story.
just keep multiplying, and that's why your costs keep going up. So you're absolutely right.
Expensive to be in this business.
Very expensive.
The one thing I was going to add is, in the industry, we're aware of some of the pain of the supporting so many broad different platforms. So if you are targeting a television market, there's an initiative you should be aware of called the Smart TV Alliance. So there's several TV manufacturers that have been banding together, and it's an open invitation for anyone else to join, but LG, Philips, Toshiba, Panasonic. Basically, there's a common web SDK that's available, so you can write your application in HTML, use that web SDK, and it will run on all of those manufacturers' platforms. And so that's continued to improve as we go forward. There'll be some announcements at the Consumer Electronics Show. Back a few months ago in Europe, we announced a common QA process as well. So again, in the past, you could use a common SDK, write the app, but then you'd have to submit it to different stores or different manufacturers. Now there's a common QA cycle, which is, again, to help the developer or the content owner to write that app once and run it on tens of millions of more devices.
That's great. Okay, I'm doing a time check here and realizing, wow, time flies. We just have about 9 minutes left or so. I think I'll ask one more question, and we'll just go down the line. And then, are there questions from the audience? If there aren't, we'll keep going. But are there? Okay, good. Okay, so not now, but hold those. We'll get to them in just a few minutes. And this is fabulous. Some real nuggets. Starting with you, Kurt, and then we'll just go down the line. So my question is, is there some yet to be created app? So this is, kind of hypothetical, and it's a future-reaching question, but, let's base it somewhat on reality. Is there some yet to be created app which is going to disrupt the TV business? So, what are you aware of or you see coming? And let me explain a bit more about where this question is coming from. So, specifically, can technology disintermediate content from its coupling with distributors? And that's a bit of a, it's the Silicon Valley battle with, LA and New York, right? So Silicon Valley thinks that, oh yes, technology is going to disintermediate, and LA and New York has a different perspective. But just curious what your thoughts are, and let's go down the line.
So I think existing distribution business models are quite favorable for multiple sides, which would lead to probably retention of those business models for a period of time, at least for years. So changes are going to be slow. So a disruptive business model, disruptive technology. I think the one thing we have to be aware of is people that are on the West Coast and maybe East Coast, some of us drink the Kool-Aid too much. And so we forget there's a whole bunch of millions or hundreds of millions of other people in the middle of the country that aren't ready to pull out a Chromecast key and plug all this stuff in. Again, my parents just called me. They live in Toronto, Canada, and their TV died. Their 22-year-old tube television, one of their TVs died, and they're like calling me up. We want to get an LG TV with one of these 108p and 60HZs, but we don't know what that means. And so this is the, I always ask my team, can my mother use this? Does my mother want to use this? So I think simple, intuitive. It's not about the technology. User experience is important.
It's interesting. Simple and intuitive is disruptive, right? Okay, Mark?
I would echo that. Simple, clean experiences are going to be the way to keep existing business models. So now, speaking for myself and not my company in any way, I'm hoping there's a big disruption. I'm hoping there's something that's coming out that can really reshape the way that we experience content altogether. And if that's done through a television set or a handheld set, mobile device, I think we need something to kind of, we need a new business model too. Right now, at least for most studios, there's a declining home video business. And we need a way to be able to reinvigorate that, or we're not going to be able to produce content at, the expense, very expensive to produce content for TV and for studios. So we need something to kind of help pick up the slack so we can keep that awesome content coming.
Got one word for you: smell-o-vision. Honestly, if you can get smells going through the internet, that would be sweet. Other than that, I said, and I think that's what you ended up with, Mark, is really the key point, is that the studios aren't going to need a way to keep producing great content. And they need a way to keep funding the production of that great content. So any business model that causes them to decrease in revenue is not something that they're going to support, and therefore you won't get good content out of it. So the disruption is either something that preserves their revenue, or maybe gets them more, and also is a simple, clean, easy customer experience, or it's, create your own studio.
I'm sorry, but really quickly, which I think is starting to happen, right? That's where a lot of the independent filmmakers and the internet and OTT being a distribution mechanism is really starting to provide a lot of people opportunity. I think we said that earlier, opportunity for distribution. So I think that is a really good thing, and it kind of equalizes everybody. But yeah, it does jeopardize some current models.
And how much time are our kids spending watching YouTube or Vines being passed around? They're spending hours a day.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no killer app for you. I apologize. Reminds me of the days.
So disappointed.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. But I think that they've got it right. It's going to the distribution model is where the change is going to happen first. And, there's going to have to be some mechanism where you can start trusting content from there. Right, because there's too many voices out there right now. It's white noise, and somebody's got to make it pink or make it shaped somehow to break that distribution model, I think. But I don't think it's going to be an app that does that.
Excellent. Good comments. Okay, questions? Yes. And I will restate it just for the sake of the video and all that.
I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit more about the network branded apps, more like the HBO Go types and Viacom rolling out apps, not only for like TV, and all of their individual networks. And just kind of, if you think that the individual network branded apps are a good road to go down, or do we get to the point where we have 300 cable networks and then we have 300 network branded apps, and I don't really want to access any of them?
Okay, so
Or like 5.
a broad question, but I think for purpose of the video, so I think the question is, do we end up with 300 channels and 300 apps? Somewhat tenuous to even navigate them, and there's more to your question, but commentary.
I think, some people's perspective, a channel is an app, and a platform should facilitate quick app switching between apps or channels, and there needs to be some kind of intuitive user experience to help consumers find what they want in the universe of 300 or 3 million channels. A recommendation engine for the few people that know what they want to search for. They have to be so I think from a user experience perspective, it's possible. I think if all of those channels are tying into TV everywhere, then there's another story, and people have to look at, studios need to look at what makes sense for their distribution bottom line.
And there's some interesting experimentation going on. You've got Manhattan, Verizon launched Udini to try to break out of that and say, well, I think I know what I want to watch. I don't know if it's on TNT or TBS or Sci-Fi or HGN or whatever. That the market can support the 300. People's number one complaint is there's too many TV channels on my cable box already. I only watch 5. So maybe those 5 apps are the ones that go on your iPad or whatever. But I don't think you can maintain people's knowledge of, that channel has that show, and I don't think that's sustainable, personally.
Okay, good question. Next question?
Yeah. Very false.
to rent a movie and watch it at home, the same model as a Netflix pretty soon in the future, or is something like that in the pipeline?
So the business model we have right now, and it's what we've launched in March earlier this year, is we've got a subscription package that allows you to watch any of our 4,000 or 5,000 subscription movies for a monthly rate. Or DVD rental credits. So it's a mixture of the disc-based Redbox model as well as the over-the-top streaming. We also have a business model with some content, about 2,500 or so transactional titles, where you can either rent it, and when you do that, you pay a one-time fee, and you've got 30 days to start watching and 24 or 48 hours to finish watching, standard rental terms for the industry. And we've also got the movie and then have the ability to stream it whenever and wherever you want for forever.
And are you a member of Ultraviolet? Those EST titles, will they go in my locker?
Yeah, we announced membership of Ultraviolet.
So that the rental thing is already available on mobile devices?
Yes. Yeah, you can. We're on a whole bunch of platforms, including mobile devices.
Okay, next question.
Seems like we're making our viewing decisions based on thumbnails and really miss channel surfing, popping in the middle of an episode, watch 10 seconds. Is anything being done to replicate that as we make these decisions on where to watch?
Ooh, that's a great question.
That's a great feature for somebody to develop, but it requires a
Any
tremendous...
startups in the room working
Yeah.
on
How
that?
big is your data plan?
Exactly. That's actually a really great point. But you're also looking at the earlier question about 300 channels, right? 300 different apps. Yeah, there's certainly an opportunity there, but if unfortunately, not all providers have the same content. So some people have deeper libraries, some people don't have children's shows, for example, for rent, purchase, or SVOD. So it becomes a very challenging area to meet, but I think there's a great opportunity there for the industry.
Half-second to 1 second channel change time. Try that in HLS.
But I think what you're getting at is content discovery. And so what I think what you're going to find is new ways to be able to do that, maybe not the traditional ways of surfing, but there are companies like Genie I'm a big fan of, where they've got a different way to discover content. So I think you might see some innovation in that space.
One of the things, and that just made me think of something, is that discovery is really 300 apps that you use. You want to find what to watch, and I think you could trust an algorithm, and the algorithms are getting better and better, or you can use for app developers out there, you could do some manual curation, and that manual curation is something that's a lot of people in New York and LA have a lot of expertise with, and so we do a mixture of both. We do have a large database of movies. Is very important for figuring out, hey, what's really interesting to watch today? What is something that our programming department has put together that's timely and useful and relevant to our subscribers?
Excellent. Okay, one last question. All right. Okay, time's up. Thank you. You've been a great audience. Please join me in thanking our panel.